The Dalit people in India have been oppressed for more than 3,000 years in the country's history. Over many years, every generation has revolted, but their struggles have not been recorded adequately, neither been researched. In the history textbooks, the revolutions of Dalits remain untold. Maybe there could be many, or there could not be at all, but we do not have any necessary records of Dalit lives. India has refused to acknowledge, let the world know that the caste system is being one of the diseases that it has carried so profusely. Refuting this every argument of Indian governments, we saw few individuals coming on the stage and educating to the world the suffering of the Dalit people of India. One of them is Mr. Yogesh Varhade, a very well-known figure in the circles of academic as well as non-academic activism. His presentation to various United Nations bodies as well as European Union has remained one of the landmark moments for the Dalit rights movement in the world and in India. Mr. Yogesh Varhade is not very well known for the people across because of the timely intervention that he offered, but in contemporary era, that gap remains to be filled. In order to discuss these issues, to know his story as well as to know the kind of work he did, to educate the current generation as to the work he has been doing for over the years, and what kind of lessons we can learn, what kind of lessons the Dalit organizations in India, and more specifically the youth groups that are coming in India as well as abroad, can take from his working style, from his organizational structure, as well as his multiple interventions on multiple platforms, be it media, be it international bodies, or be it dealing with the government emissaries. We introduce you Mr. Yogesh Varhade. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We are very delighted to have you. And personally, I am excited to have you to discuss about many things. But to begin with, could you maybe comment on what is ACJP?
ACJP is basically an NGO, Ambedkar Center for Justice and Peace. It was founded in 1991, the year of Baba Saheb's centenary, and later on it took on the United Nations treaty bodies for the last 27 years. Now the question arises about what the ACJP is basically focused on. It is nationally, it is focused on empowering the Dalits, empowering the women according to the constitutional provisions for regaining their dignity, reclamation of their human personality, and also focusing also on the work of United Nations. United Nations, before we started to go to Geneva, was not at all aware of this issue as such. It is when I started to go to United Nations in 1991, after Dr. Ambedkar's birth anniversary celebrated in a massive scale in Columbia University, of which Dr. Baba Saheb was the alumni. The atrocities were constantly being heard in the US, and then we decided to do something about it. So we started to go to United Nations on the working group on indigenous population, because that time we were not aware of how to enter the system. So it was an ABCD of working in the United Nations, and there we learned a lot of things over the years. So first thing was working group on indigenous population, where Julian Berger was the secretary and Madam Diaz was the chairman of the working group, which was formed about 10 years earlier. And that group started to discuss the Dalits and the tribals as the indigenous people. That gave us a platform, and for the first time, when I made the statement in a working group on indigenous population in 1991, probably that was about 31st of July 1991, after Baba Saheb's Jayanti in centenary in New York as well as in Toronto. So it turned out to be a shock waves in United Nations. People could never imagine that there could be such a vast population as the indigenous people, which was roughly around anywhere between 200 to 300 million population, and they are the indigenous peoples of India. They are the natives of India. and how the Aryan invasion pushed them into the corner to become the slave race, converting them into the slave race and utilizing all the privileges of this country as a foreign invaders, which is the common story among European countries also. But population size was so vast that many governments, including Amnesty International and many other governments, they just lined up. By the time I finished the speech, they just lined up nearly about a couple of hundred people to get the copies of those statements, and that started the subject in the United Nations. Now, when they came to know that this is a similar story of what you can say the invaders versus the native people, that remained for the time being, and the Indian government always has denied it. The Indian government got so angry about it. So, there has been a constant denial for the inside world as well as outside world. India has been thinking that by putting below the carpet, they can hide the issue, but that is not the case. So, this has been the trend of Indian government by hiding the subject, and instead of discussing it openly and trying to find a solution, they thought that they can continue for many years this whole issue to be hidden, to keep it hidden in a closet. And the result is now in 2001 when the World Conference took place, World Conference against racism in Durban. So, I submitted them the recent killings and destruction of the Kodaikalam area in Tamil Nadu, where about 350 houses of that is were smashed, destroyed, women were beaten, children were beaten, old people were beaten. Not only that didn't stop it, but also they put the bad stuff in their well, which was the only drinking water area. And what was their fault? There was a small amount of youngsters who went to Dubai and other Middle East countries, and they started to make couple of dollars there, and after going for a few years, they built their houses and started a new life, and they asked their parents not to go and work as a landless laborers. And that angered the Thevar community. How dare these people are challenging us, they are getting a comfort zone and we must teach them a lesson. With that anger, they had destroyed that. This matter, when I brought it to the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, they were stunned. And India has been boasting in that committee that, oh, we have got the biggest democracy, best democracy, we were the first ones in the fall of the South Africa, we were the leaders that time, etc. So, we have no problem whatsoever. And then they asked the 18 experts on the committee, which are the global experts, they asked them very clearly, if that is the case, what is the situation now that the 350 houses have been smashed, their living standards been shown, their certificates and diplomas have been destroyed, what is this, what does this indicates? And the Indian government did not have any answer. So they had to keep the mouth quiet and just listen to them very carefully. And then on the top of that, they challenge also the committee. Oh, no, this is this problem is not for racism, we don't have a racism. But in the Article 1 of the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, it very clearly says any discrimination based on sex, age, the language, religion, including descent, is prohibited. And that is where then finally Professor Michael Benton, who was the chair that time, and Professor Garwala was the vice chair, he told them that you have to listen to our judgment. We are not going to listen to what you think. And this is an international convention, you have signed for it and you must abide by it. Right.
Now, could you take us back to tell us how and why did you decide to work internationally? And if you could maybe present to us your story, like who are you and how did you come about thinking international activism was one of the important part of your movement?
I was born in a small tiny village near Nagpur, near Hingna, known as Sukhli. My grandfather was a Kotwal there, the village security guy, and my parents were doing the farming, etc., as I was told, etc. So I have a very humble background, and my parents in Nagpur later on became the cotton mill workers in Empress Mills. Now, after that, after finishing the inter science in Nagpur, then I went for BSc in Pune, and from Ferguson College, after finishing my graduation, then I went to engineering college, and then I had an offer for trainee engineer from Germany. I left in India in 1967. When I went there in Germany, I always had a back of my mind to do something to pay the Baba Saheb debt. When I was in the college, there was a great tragedy in Marathwada. The Shirazgaon is a small town near Aurangabad, and there they had paraded 4 women naked because they wanted that these women should not demand more wages. They should remain as a landless labor and be thankful that they are getting the small wages. And I noted that. So I said that I have to do something in my life to change that. So there then I decided to go to the English speaking countries, and then I got the immigration for Canada. So I went to Canada and I started to establish, and I realized that unless I have some business of my own, I may not be able to stand a chance to get the freedom. And then thereafter I started to work first, and then 1972 I went into the business of used cars and petrol business. So I had a repair shop and gas station, etc. Somehow we managed the combination without having any money. They started with that. But 1972 I got the Volvo dealership, which is a very prestigious car in the Europe and around the world, and I became a dealer of that. And then we started to move in the social field. Then I had asked some other youngsters, is there anybody, a fellow person who can come and help me in the social work? And for that purpose, then lot of people whom we got connected from the all over India, those engineers who were settled there, then we started to bring them together. And from there, I invited nearly about 30-40 families to Welland, where I was there in Canada during that time. So there they came back, and we had a formation of an organization known as Vision. So I was one of the principal founders of that, and they were very delighted because they never saw something like that somebody like us will own the car dealerships. So they were very pleased with that. And thereafter then the Vision started to grow up as an independent institution, and I had the privilege because of the business that I could take off a couple of days, and this is actually get started with me. So I went for the first time to United Nations on 31st of July 1991.
So tell us why United Nations? Like, why did you thought about it?
That I thought United Nations is the world's biggest organization where all the global issues are resolved, number one, and maybe resolved could easily. Perhaps we had a wrong understanding. There is a long process of debates and all those things. So I thought that let me try it. And for the first time, when you go, you don't have the permits or anything. And then I came to know that I could attend as an indigenous person of India to the working group on indigenous population. I found some information on that, and then I went straight head on there, prepared a draft, and there I made a statement that in the world the biggest indigenous peoples of the world are sitting in India, and they have been enslaved for 3,000 years, and that needs to be changed. Even the constitution provides all the provisions, but these people are not ready to give up their grips on that, and they are all misguiding by controlling everything, right from media, money, power, bureaucracy, judiciary, everything. So it was taken very well. Then suddenly we heard that there is going to be a world conference on human rights. That excited me very much because I thought this is the best opportunity to bring it to the whole world. So there was a PrepCom meeting that took place in Canada, and then the other PrepCom took place in Bangkok. An interesting thing developed. Probably I was so charged with challenging the Hindus there in that committee. I said, we are talking about the World Conference on Human Rights, and here the biggest human rights violations in the world have not been even discussed about it. So I brought that issue there, and I pushed it so hard in Bangkok that before anybody among Indians realized it, it was already passed. Then India got in a shock when they heard that such a resolution has been passed in that PrepCom, because PrepCom decisions they eventually come to the World Conference. So I decided that at any cost we should do everything possible to continue this force. And when we came to Austria, where the World Conference was taking place in Vienna, they suddenly Indian government got so shocked. They were afraid that if this resolution passes in the final round, then India will have a great difficulty in dealing with it. So they brought about 10-15 professors from JNU, as well as this hypocrite sadhu of India known as Swami Yogesh. He was supposed to be the bonded labor person. He got involved into our committees, etc. He says there is a problem of bonded labor, so I want to get involved. I said that's fine. But then he had a second agenda, that at any cost block us from proceeding further in this matter. And the very interesting part, one of the well-known figure in Bombay also approached me that time, because we had all the posters all around there. The untouchables are born as slaves, live as slaves, and die as slaves. Devdas system, for the convenience and pleasure of the caste Hindus, they push our little girls into the prostitution and in the Devdas systems, etc. So all those slogans were there. So when some of the Hindus who are well known here in the Bombay, they came, the Minar Pimpare and the few other people, Vivek Pandit, etc. They became later on MLA, etc. I understand here. So they came to us, which is especially Pandit, and with a folded hand he said, "Sir, can you please do us a favor? This is defaming the Hinduism very much so. Can you please stop this here? We will help you in Bombay, anything you want us to." So they said that, well, Swami Yogesh told us that how can you blame us only, because caste system also exists in the Muslim religion, it also exists in the Christianity, and Hindu religion, if it is there, then you cannot blame just one religion. And I just listened to him here. I said, we gave you about 40-50 years to correct your action, and you failed it. So now get the hell out of here and don't show up yourself. And thereafter I never saw him.
Mr. Varhade, you just gave us a sweeping or kind of tour de force of 1970s, 1980s and 1990s activism. One of the questions that was constantly coming to my mind was, why United Nations? And if it was your conviction that United Nations is a world body that could give us justice, when was the first time did you ever make any intervention in the United Nations, and what body was it? Indigenous Peoples Forum or was it something else?
Yeah, in first intervention I did in the working group on indigenous population on 31st of July 1991. Then I found a ways to participate in one of the meaningful platforms in the United Nations. Then I started to get every single opportunity I can for bringing this issue. And treaty bodies was one of the major bodies where each country has to submit their reports on that matter. Now, interesting part was, in the treaty bodies, after 1993 World Conference on Human Rights, with all the drama that took place there, and Indian government created a lot of obstacles for us in getting the final report, etc., final draft that caste system should not be included, that sort of format. And we fought back hard, and by that time it was already circulated among the members. So I thought that, okay, even if now they dilute it, it doesn't make a difference, and we proceeded further. Then the 1993 World Conference gave us a lot of friends, and I started to discuss with them how we can push it forward. And then in 1995 World Conference took place in Copenhagen, World Summit on Social Development. That was another occasion. Nelson Mandela, the Clinton, and all the world heads of the states were coming there. So we put a platform there, and it was on a World Summit on Social Development, was basically eradication of poverty. In the eradication of poverty, then I started to question in the NGO forum How in the world this world body can even discuss this issue when the biggest starving people sitting in India have not been even considered yet. And I was so annoyed with that journalists picked up my frustration and anger. So the Politiken, there is a national newspaper like Times of India in Denmark, and also the Berlingske Tidende, they came and both of them took my interview, and next day half a page article they published in the newspapers. And the second is the Politiken.
Also Denmark.
Denmark, so both of them. It really happens that these two opposite newspapers can publish the similar interview, but it happened during that time.
People might ask you, what's the point of making statements when the poverty, when the oppression, when the atrocities, when everyday violence is still committed? Why should we pay attention to merely giving statements to the international bodies when they have very limited powers to do anything that happens in India, because India is a sovereign country, it's a republic, it has its own constitution, it has its own structures. How did you got the local Ambedkarites here in India convinced about the importance of international activism?
Since India is a signatory to all the United Nations major treaties, India has an obligation to abide by it. Constitution is there. Here these people, they crush every effort to make the culprits suffer for it. So one of the important ways was to expose them internationally and bring the pressure of the international governments, which is United Nations, for forcing them to abide by the norms of the civil society. And that I found it very interesting, because India was afraid of that, and India could not stop us from using this platform. Since I was beyond the control of that, I am a citizen of the Canada and US, etc. And I thought that this is the wrong thing. And in India, they have been succeeded, the caste Hindus, all these years. It is basically the wealth is owned by the Marwadis, and the media is owned by the Marwadis, but run by the Brahmins. Then you got the police departments and all these places. IAS and IPS officers are nearly about 70-80% are coming from the 3% population of Brahmins. And then on the top of that, the judges are their uncles. At the same time, when you have to take the final call to United Nations, the justice system, so they have locked up all the systems, and by keeping them illiterate, ignorant and starving, these people have succeeded in continuing the system, cleaning the filthy toilets of these people. What a shame for this nation that millions of people are put on the job to clean the toilets of these stupid people. They should have changed the India a long time back and given them the freedom to go and have education. What they do is that they keep them illiterate, ignorant and starving. By that way they can force the particular profession in that. And this I found that I will definitely expose them internationally to make them realize that this is not acceptable.
Mr. Varhade, so in today's day and age, if you raise any questions about the country India, there's an imminent risk that you might be branded as someone who's working against India, or being an anti-national, or being less of a patriot. Now in such hostilities, which is not new to the activists who are working internationally, how did you manage to work the way you did for so long and still remained steadfast with your commitment to the work that you are doing?
In fact, I am not harming India. I am helping India for a simple reason, that if we do not change the sufferings of millions of people, you can only suppress the people for so long, and at the breaking point people are going to revolt and there will be a civil war. All the sociologists in the world, they agree on that matter. They are only afraid that how India is going to deal with it. Many of these countries have that thought touched to them. So when I talk to many powerful countries in the Europe and many other countries, and I said that if we do not ask India to change their ways and to treat their brothers with dignity and give them the freedom of education, freedom of livelihood, empowerment of the girls, then in that case somewhere along the line this is going to create a spark. So actually I want to bring the peace in India. I want to have the full development of the every single human being in this country. You cannot have a sizable 25%, 30% of population at the who is do not have even the enough to eat, whose girls are taken for raping and all kinds of ills of the society. In fact, the funny part is, if you look at the numbers, so while I have been working all these years in this field, I found very interesting in the United Nations and even the World Bank, ILO and the UNDP, they all have the figures ready with them, including UNICEF and UNESCO. What are the figures now? 17% of global population is contained in India. Okay. India has got 50% of the child labor of the world. India has got 50% of the bonded labor of the world. And India has got 50% of the trafficking of the girls and women of the world. And who are these people? Majority of these people are scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Madam Karp, who was the special rapporteur on the Child Rights Committee in 2000, she told me how in the world a country can spoil its millions of children in this matter and destroy their lives. Actually, children are their greatest asset, not the buildings, not the walls, but it is the children who are the future of a country, and how they can they continue this exploitation of the children, I can't understand. Even though the Supreme Court has given the judgment that every child has a right to go to education, free education till the age of 14. You know. So, what I am doing here is I am avoiding that civil war. And I have warned also the many foreign governments that you have to put the pressure on India at this stage. Otherwise, if the civil war breaks, it will be the greatest tragedy on the earth of unlimited proportion. Unaccountable deaths and the tragedies will happen. And what will be the results? Very simple. The billions of dollars invested by the foreign governments will be wiped out once the civil war starts. Nobody can account for that. Number two, these millions of people will start running out of the country for their lives. And Europe and America and Canada and all these people, they will be flooded with the refugees, and their economies will collapse with such a vast proportion, and nobody will be able to stop. United Nations hasn't got enough force to contain this India in this matter. So previously they were not very serious about it, but now when I talk to many governments to help us to make India realize its obligations according to Constitution, they said yes, this can happen now. Right. So what I am doing is, I am changing India democratically through the pressure of the United Nations, just like the same thing happened. This is called a hidden apartheid of South Asia. And I want to break it down in the same way as the South Africa's apartheid was broken down with the help of United Nations. That gave me the energy to push right to the limit.
Mr. Varhade, tell me how many years have been so long for you in this internationalizing of Dalit movement?
I think since 1990 when I started with my group in Bombay, SCJP, that I have been going last 27 years non-stop.
So 27 years.
Right.
You said that in 1970s this kind of organizational thinking began. Was there in any way the Dalit Panther movement in India was also pretty active and focusing on atrocities? Did it in any way guide you, inspire you, or didn't have any interest in your thinking?
I was aware of their work to some degree, but other than that it did not touch me at all. My aim was to bring the international pressure on India to realize its obligation for protecting the people with their dignity. And this is what actually inspired me, and then I never looked back. With getting involved into many of these different treaty bodies, that opened the whole new door for me. And then I realized that it has a tremendous power, the treaty bodies, and the countries have to abide by it. So, from that point of view, I continued with them in bringing through the different treaty bodies, and right from 1991 onwards, all the major treaty bodies we have covered up on our issues, right from child labor, atrocities, violation of the women's rights through the CEDA, through Committee on Child Rights. Then it went to the extent that Committee on Civil and Political Rights, etc. So, all these committees, they gave me the answer that yes, we will ask India on these matters the full questions why they are not abiding by their obligations. And I think that that put me on the map for doing this work, and that encouraged me that there is something I could do in this situation on a smaller scale.
So how is UN going to help in this?
Yes, UN is definitely going to help. They will question India on this matter, that how they are going to deal with this. And from that point of view, India has to give its commitment and obligations that there is a need. Now, for example, a simple example happened recently when I went to United Nations, that in 2018 recently, there that time 40,000 people who came to Marijapachi in 1975, 76 and all these earlier years as the refugees. They are mostly the Namashudras, scheduled caste, West Bengal. Marijapachi, West Bengal. They are mostly the helpless people who migrated, who were forced to migrate to Bangladesh. And when they found that it was not satisfactory, there were a lot of exploitation going on, so they left it and they slowly started to come in the Bengal, which was agreed by Nehru and Gandhi's, that they can come any time within the next 10 years without any problem. When they came, the Jyoti Basu's government was there. They said, okay, you go to Marijapachi, Dandakaran area. And when they went there, on 26 January 1979, they ordered, Jyoti Basu ordered to stop the flow of food for that area. So these people were starving, they started to revolt, and he sent about nearly 25 launches of police there with the guns, and they killed nearly every one of them. This is a report written by Professor Sen Gupta from Delhi University.
So now you understand that United Nations is a political body.
Right.
And these are very much political decisions.
Right.
It has to do with the political calculations
Right.
of its own governments,
Right.
the pros and cons.
Right. Right.
And they have to strike a balance
Right.
to draw their attention.
Right.
Now you are an organization which is civil society. Of course, civil society has its own value and it acts as an effective group. But you working, and that too on a singular level.
Right.
How do you think, like apartheid, of course, the governments were opposed, and second thing was the South African apartheid was contested by the people of South Africa themselves, who were outside South Africa, who formed these political units, and they were representative of the liberation organizations in their own country, and that's how they created this consensus of wherever they are. Now you are here with one organization trying to tear down the United Nations body and hoping that it will come across as it has done to South Africa. How do you see that happening?
That's a very important point. We have now a lot of Dalits, the Buddhists from Maharashtra and other parts of India. They have been settling now in many parts of the world, including USA, Canada, Europe, and a lot of them are anxious to work in this field. So what will happen is they themselves will carry the torch further for bringing the United Nations pressure on India. Obviously, it is a matter of so far we have been putting all the money from our own pocket on this whole development, and the future, just like the other movements are there, Sikh movement is there, Jammu and Kashmir and many other international NGOs movements are there. So people will start collecting the funds and fighting also for their just cause, for a simple reason that unless there is a fairness and justice and the right to live with dignity is available for every human being on this earth, the friction is going to take place. So what I see is that even if as a small organization we started this Ambedkar Center for Justice and Peace, but it had did its very important job and it is still doing it. And gradually the youngsters who are sitting in the foreign countries are anxious to join this movement. And this is all democratic.
Now you say these are the challenges that could even be prevalent for the coming generations. How do you think these are the challenges that one could tackle? So if you have to give, or if you want to foresee a future where these challenges are not imminent, how would you go about it?
Now, the first and foremost thing, in 1928, Baba Saheb said in the Mahar Satyagraha time that if our problem is not solved in India, we will take it to the League of Nations, which was that time United Nations previous name. Then in 1946 again he said that it doesn't look like our problem is going to get solved here, we will take it to the United Nations, and that is when he wrote to Professor Dubois. On a long term basis, if India has to stand as the greatest nation on the earth, it cannot stand alone. It has to have the sanction of all the other in the galaxy of all the countries, 194 countries. If that is the case, then India has to prove that it has been abiding by the fundamental rights instruments of the United Nations and all the treaty bodies, and it cannot just say that no, we don't have any responsibility, we still would be a good government, independent, etc. That's not happened. The World Bank's report is there on child labor, the trafficking report is there. I talked to the leader in the special report on trafficking. She has asked 6 times permission to Indian government. Indian government has not given any permission, rejected each time. I made to Madam Pillai also twice. She wanted to start a branch in the Human Rights Division of United Nations. They refused that. Then the Glade Hanzo in 98-99, he wrote about 6 times to Indian government, let me come and look at the problem, then so we can come up with a solution. It is not there. This is not the way it is going to be solved. What they need to do is allow all these special reporters on different subjects to India, child rights, bonded, the trafficking of girls, then the bonded labor, all these special reporters in India, study them, let them bring it to the discussion, and then out of that, just like they helped South Africa eventually later on, same thing will happen in India. And I don't see it. Now the importance is to keep the continuous pressure on Indian government and also educate the Indian civil society on that matter, which I mentioned about in 1996, Article 31, Human Rights Education. I mentioned it earlier, that it needs to be human rights education, become a part of the day and night living about the children. Every child has to learn that we are totally equal right from the grade 1. Not by avoiding that I am a high caste and you are low caste child. This is not about it. Even still also hundreds of children, millions of children are sitting in the outside of the class in the village level, and even the cities also they do the same thing. So this psychology has to change it. If the India has to, this cancer to the Indian society's brain that is sitting there, it has to be eliminated.
Right. So now, before we go, the Dalit political parties or the Dalit civil society seems to not have this international perspective.
No.
They don't seem to have this conviction that we also have in another forum where we can simultaneously fight this battle, in addition to fighting the battle here domestically within the courts, the police structure, as well as within the society. Why do you think this has happened, or what would you see as a potential of new political parties?
Okay. That is absolutely a very positive question. The reason is these petty politicians who are bought out very easily, by the other political parties for their gains, they keep on staying in that stagnant positions and keep their mouth shut. In fact, there is a danger for India. If the United Nations take this matter very seriously, a major population like here in India will be demanding in future separate settlement and separate electorate. India will not be able to stop it for the United Nations if the whole pressure of United Nations comes on India. And I see that coming, because India is not changing its tactics and responsibilities sharing. So if they don't want that to happen, and the civil society has to be educated completely on the caste system, what you abide by, what do you do in your house has nothing to do what you do outside in the civil society. You must change your tactics that everybody can live in peace. And when Baba Saheb says that our fight is for justice and we are bound to win because the law is in our favor. Okay. The world is in our favor also. So unless we keep on fighting for this reason, and these tiny politicians who have been sold out for the personal benefits, they have to be set aside, and with the separate electorate and separate settlements, they should start talking about it. There is no problem in that. But Baba Sahib demanded that, and it is a high time that our people start demanding that. We already stated that in our 2008 third committee, we are going to be equal in every aspect, and one of the best ways is ask for separate settlement and separate electorate, period. And we can still live in peace within the country, not outside the country. We don't want a separate country. Within the country, as Baba Sahib demanded that, and we will have our own economies, we will have our development, we will manage on our own. If you can't deliver it, we will deliver it, our own existence and our protection for our women, where nowadays that any woman is picked up from anywhere and then raped and killed. This has become a norm in this society. How sickness is this? How sick is this society? Nowhere in the world. And all our people who got lot of benefits due to the blessings of Baba Sahib, he died for us. So it is our obligation to give it back to the society. And those who are living in foreign countries as well as within India, they are in a comfort zone. They all should donate not 5% but 10% of their income, so that we can change the lives on our own. In fact, we have got the power on both sides in this matter. We can also create our own economies, our own development.
And now you are the one who is taking separate electorate as a stand to the United Nations, appealing on behalf of the Dalit peoples, the oppressed, the most inconveniently placed people in the society, that we need our separate electorate, so we have our own dignity, we will manage our own ways without relying on the oppressor. And I think this has been one of the path-breaking interventions made on your behalf. Now the youth here are in unrest. They are the ones who look forward to the future, and they see everything is blank when it comes to every other problems, and now they are getting educated too, they are accessing foreign education. When you see this, how do you want to see this coming in another 20 years?
I remember, because I had the privilege to see Baba Sahib in 1954, Bhandara election. I had a privilege to take his autograph also and talk to him for a couple of lines. I was a kid, 13 years old. Then I saw him in the Diksha time on 14th of October, 15th of October 1956. And thereafter, what happened to our society? Those who have made substantial amount of money by getting educated and getting benefited because of the Baba Sahib's struggle all his life, he died for us. These people have a moral responsibility to come to help this cause, because today they might think that they are in a comfort zone, but if this negative behavior of the high caste Hindus continue, then it is bound to take place that their grandchildren will go into slavery. So it is a moral obligation on them also to, at any cost, moral obligation also on these people to, at any cost, to share the load of creating a system where the future generation of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes can live in dignity. And one of the ways is not 5%, Baba Sahib asked 5%, just like in the Muslim religion. Zakat is compulsory on every Friday. So similar to that, our educated class people who made a lot of money, had enough to eat, lot of surplus funds, they should donate 10% of their income to this cause and start creating the new enthusiasm with the very committed people moving in this direction. The present scenario of these politicians is pretty sad and pretty bad. So to get out of that and create a good cadre for the future of our children and intellectual development among the NGOs for moving in the direction of United Nations. United Nations is the body which I think we should follow till the end, till our problems are solved. And United Nations has a provision. A sizable amount of population, if they are not satisfied in a particular country, then they can demand their separate land and separate settlements, which Baba Sahib asked in 1930s. So we are just going for that, whatever great liberator has done it already for that. And Gandhi perhaps did not act in a good faith during the Pune Pact, and we lost some about the benefits which they had promised initially. So I think that we have to come back on that. But Gandhi made the mistake. We trusted him in the Pune Pact matter, but he did not continue his obligations in the same way. And the Hindu society owes us that they have to correct their blunders and start correcting their the actions for the positive development of India. The only way the positive development of India can take place is when our people start marching with them on the equal footing, and that is where exactly all the youngsters have to follow up that. The only pressure that can Indian government will feel the heat of it is when the pressure of United Nations start mounting on India. Okay. And I don't think that India can stop it with the Indian government. I talked to many governments over the years. They all feel a great empathy for our cause, and we will use it to the fullest extent for a rational discussion on this issue, a logical settlement for our future and for the future of our girls and children, and I don't think that I will settle for less. Thank you.
So we've seen after Ambedkar, 1970s onwards in North America, and in 1960s in fact in the United Kingdom, the movement for the justice of Dalit people, which were fighting against the caste system, happened across the world. 1970s onwards, 1980s we saw Vision, 1990s ACJP coming on front, and from then onwards we see multiple organizations taking the issues to the United Nations. Presently we have no single organization that advocates for the rights and justice for Dalits affiliated to the ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Council of United Nations, that gives access to the Dalit people to air their grievances and discuss with the world community. In such situations, under such odds, we have seen activists like Mr. Varhade, who has been coming out from various parts of the world, taking activists and connecting with other people so that the issues of Dalits are tabled. 300 million people continue to be oppressed under the treacherous regime of casteist Hindu society. Under this regime, the Dalits have no rights to dignity, they don't have right to access to various resources for their survival, and they continue to be living among the worst possible situations one can imagine as a human being. Under these circumstances, we come to an era where we do not have a necessary political will from amongst the Dalit as well as non-Dalit quarters to make Dalit issue an international worry for the world. Baba Saheb Ambedkar himself had stated in Annihilation of Caste that caste is going to be a problem for the world community, and this continues to be true even today when caste is animating every other part of the world wherever Indians are migrated, conveniently carrying the caste. It is in this backdrop we see we are facing another set of challenges when it comes to world community, when India, or rather the Dalit community from India and across the world, do not have a chair to sit in important interventions happening in the United Nations. So I think the way to forward is to now make sure that the collective struggles that Mr. Varhade dedicated to will need to find its own friendships and its own enemies that are fighting against it, to make a pact with them and to carry the struggle of Dalits in the United Nations as well as other important intergovernmental bodies across the world. Thank you.